Hey everybody, welcome back to this wonderful, awesome
Special?
surprise of a
Is it?
of an yeah. I mean,
You told me yesterday.
Huh?
You told me about
Yeah, and that was just a surprise, right? Welcome to College Conversation with me, Rick,
And me, Nain.
and our very special guest. This was a real big surprise to us. This is
Zach Winston.
Zach Winston.
Whitson.
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 I could never.
Whitson.
I always thought it was Winston.
Oh, I always thought it was
Winston.
Winston.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
Whitson.
Whitson.
Yeah.
W-I-T.
Where's that from?
W-H-I-T.
W-A. Dude.
It's Scottish.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah. So on this show, I am notorious for screwing up people's names.
Yeah.
Even three-letter words, I mess up. So
Zach, 4 letters, easy.
yeah, no. So that was Zach is easy, but it's the last part that got me. But this is Master Z.
As his students refer to him.
So the funny thing is, I get a call a couple of days ago from a gentleman who I have not heard from for almost 10 years, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's been a
Yeah.
while. And back then, the Bladed Mind was just a sprouting little thing. We weren't all that big of a deal, and nobody actually knew us that well and whatnot.
First convention.
But he
we
was
went to?
gracious enough because Danny actually heard of you, and he didn't know you personally, right? Danny never really
Right,
trained with you, right? But because of the people you did train with before, Doug Marqueta, Omar?
Omar Hakim. Me and Doug were training partners.
Okay, and
he
then-
wasn't my teacher.
Okay, so that's what it was.
Yeah.
And then,
Omar Hakim was my first bikini detergent instructor.
wow.
Yeah.
And Omar Hakim
Hakim.
is a big deal because the way Danny was
Yeah.
talking about that guy was incredible.
Yeah, he trained with Tuhonk Gahe in New Mexico. Wow. Albuquerque. I believe.
When did Gahe get to go to New Mexico?
That would have been mid to late 80s.
Because I never heard of that part of
when
it.
Omar trained with him, and then Omar moved to New Orleans where I was living at the time.
Right.
So I'm not sure I think it was around 89
Right.
when Omar actually walked into a Taiji school in New Orleans where we were running Kempo classes. And he walks in and introduces himself. The instructor there that owned the business was King Lamb, and he would host Dan Inosanto seminars all the
wow.
time. And Omar had heard of that, so he just popped in to say hi, and so he starts talking, and he says he's training with Leo Gahe, and I'm like, and I knew who Leo was
Right.
from his reputation, and I'm like, well,
Everyone knows.
where do you live? And he lived a block over from me, like around the block. And the school was on the other side of New Orleans from
Right.
my house, and it's like, well, I want to train. And so the next day he walks to my house, and we got
That's
together in my
amazing.
backyard and
I mean, talk about
started training.
just pure luck.
So
of
I was really the first guy in Omar's group
Right.
when we started in New Orleans, and then we hosted Dan Inosanto in '89, I think it was, and Omar came to that. Doug was there. That's the first time I met Doug at a Dan Inosanto seminar. So, make a long story short, we started training. I was training at my house. Most of the time, Omar would come to my house and train. And then at one point, I left to go to New York. I was a deep sea diver for many years in New
Whoa.
Orleans. And so I went to New York State to work on the Erie Canal.
Wow.
And at that point, Omar was moved in as a roommate, but I wasn't there most of the time. I was gone.
He was a house sitter.
So,
Yeah, basically.
so leaning over from you and watching Naeem's face, he's got a lot of questions.
yeah. Because hold on. I know it's college conversation is primarily the topic is martial arts, but little things like that. You just glossed over. You were a deep sea diver. How'd that come about?
My father was in the Navy, World War II, and when he got out, he was a navigator on super tankers for Exxon Humble Oil Company, and so he was always out on the ocean as a merchant marine. A lot of Filipinos can relate to that.
Yes, my dad was there.
right. So,
Familiar story,
but
yes.
I lived in the mountains of Appalachia in Tennessee.
Oh, wow.
But sometimes the ship, instead of being out on the ocean traveling across the world, it might be in a dock, maybe in Florida or Alabama or wherever, and
Right.
we would go there, and that way he could get off the ship at night
to
and
you
stay
guys.
with us,
Yeah.
right? So
Oh,
it was
nice.
like a day job all of a sudden, and it was
My dad
always
never did
on
that.
the water and ocean spots, and so I'm a little kid, really small, and just enamored with the ocean and this idea. My dad goes out and works in the ocean, so at some point, I grew up watching Jacques Cousteau.
That's right. It would have been, it would have been about that time. He
The
was
French diving explorer.
Channel 7, as a matter of fact.
I had a big library of all of his books, you know, and
Marine cap.
so I'm a redneck living in the mountains of Tennessee, and I can
Dreaming
name
of the ocean.
all the different types of coral that there is.
Wow.
I could recognize fish, you know, from the Caribbean, you know.
Wow, that's amazing.
So I became a
That's so
scuba
cool.
instructor.
In Tennessee?
In Florida, in Jacksonville. I left high school. I got out of high school. A couple weeks later, I was in Jacksonville going to a scuba instructor school. And then from there, as soon as I finished that, I drove home to Tennessee. And then I got a call the next day from a guy in St. Thomas, U.S. Virgin Islands. And I moved there at 18 by
Wow.
myself to be a scuba instructor.
That's amazing.
St. Thomas?
Yeah, St. Thomas.
Oh,
and then as time went, a couple years into it, I met a guy that was there with his wife on vacation, and he was a saturation diver for Taylor Diving in New Orleans. And so
For us that don't know, what's a saturation diver?
saturation is where you're pressurized to a depth and you stay there for days or weeks or whatever, like a submarine, but the system's on the barge, on the deck of the barge.
So you got the hoses
But you
in?
have you have a bell that connects to it that's pressurized. You get in it and then they drop it down 200 or 300 feet or whatever to the bottom, and then you get out and go work. And two of you, you'll take turns. You'll be out 6 hours working out of the bell, come back to the bell, and then your partner gets out, bell partner gets out. He works 6 hours, then you get in, they pull you up, and then you eat dinner and
That's
you go to bed.
insane.
So I think my longest saturation was 25 days.
Holy crap.
My shortest one was about, it was one dive. My first saturation was 434 feet deep. We
What
did.
does that pressure feel like? I mean, do you even
You
feel
don't really, well, you feel it in your bones.
Right.
Because it presses all the fluids out of your joints.
Right.
And so you can hear your bones grinding together.
Oh,
my
shit.
When you're in the bell
Yeah.
or when you're in a system, you see, once they put you on the deck, you're still at close to the bottom pressure, right?
Wow,
And so
yeah.
there you can hear, when you're underwater, there's all this ambient noise and you
Right.
can't hear anything, but you know you're doing long-term damage to your shoulders
Oh,
and
shit.
elbows. And
So you would have been taller then.
I'm shorter now because I'm old. We shrink, dude. We shrink.
Bone reduction is a real thing, yeah.
That is insane. I mean,
In fact, I ran into a friend the other day here in Sacramento, actually, and he used to be taller than me. He's 10 years older than me, and I'm like, no, I'm taller than him because he's shrink. But I'll catch up. I'll catch up.
You'll catch up.
Going
You'll
backwards.
catch up.
You'll see
down.
eye to eye eventually.
Yeah.
He'll catch up going down.
Yeah.
It's bizarre. You know, that's amazing stuff. Now, though, ever since we met back almost 10 years ago, I always think very fondly of you and Josh. Right? That guy.
thanks. Yeah.
That guy used to always make me laugh because he would always look so goddamn serious. And then one time I called him on it, and he goes, and he had this giant smile. He goes, "No, I'm a real jackass. I go, you're funny too." I'm like, "You, okay?" But wonderful guy. Where did you find him? Because that, to me, I've always wondered. I mean, he's almost like your son, or
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
right?
It's a mini
He's
him.
like my son
Yeah,
at this
I mean,
point. Yeah.
this
Yeah.
he's amazing.
Yes, he is. He's a fantastic martial artist, fantastic person. He was friends with Gil Hibben's son, Derek Hibben. They were buddies, and there were a lot of martial arts events on the Upper East Coast, and I would present in a lot of those things. And I actually trained I learned how to make knives from Gil Hibben, this master knife
Right.
maker. He's a very famous knife maker. So I went and trained with him on making knives, and the deal was, you teach Derek martial arts, and I'll teach you knife making. So we had a
Nice
trade.
trade.
There's a lot
I
of
like it.
I've
Yeah.
had several trades. Something
No,
like
those
that.
are always the funnest ones.
So at one point, I was familiar with Josh. I knew his face. I didn't really know his name. And at one point at a seminar I was teaching, Derek comes up with him and says, "This is Josh Ryer. He wants to train with you." And I'm like, okay. So we got to know each other, and then we started training, and that's been about 23 or more years ago.
How old was he when you guys met?
He was in college. He was still pretty young. He wasn't out of college yet. He had the spiky Bart Simpson kind of hair.
I know, you look at him now, he looks so militant.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, he's like...
Yeah, actually, he's grown hair back.
Yeah, I've
He
seen his
keeps
pictures,
head shaved.
His kids are amazing.
They're so
Those
crazy.
freaking little boy wrestlers.
Oh my God!
Those
you
guys
should
are-
see him. You should.
Yeah.
See. This is them now. They're like 10 or 11
Right.
now. I think when when one of them was must have been about 7 or 8. I'm standing there in a conversation, and I look down, and he's trying to do a low single leg takedown on me. And so my counter for that is I also train in Wu style Tai Chi, and the stance they have, they stand on one leg vertically with the leg bent, and so so when they push, they don't have their legs spread and they're pushing with their legs. It's all about the alignment, and it's a vertical stance, and I just sunk into that, and then he's like, can't get him. Right. I'm like, are you trying to do a single leg on me?
But they're adorable little kids.
When they were babies,
They're
when they were babies, you know, in their underwear, the two of them, they would have these pro wrestling smackdowns. And, me, the whole family, we're all sitting around and just watching them laughing and videoing, and it's like, maybe we shouldn't show this to people. I think we're abusing these kids, but they're just laughing and
Oh no, I've been
and
following
rolling.
because he loves to post about his kids.
Oh.
And it always cracks me up because they have all these always first place. I'm like, wow, amazing kids.
And their big sister, she's a super athlete too.
Right? Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
She does like a gymnastics type of cheers and stuff. He sent me a picture yesterday, and she's about as high as from your floor to the ceiling, upside down with her legs perfectly straight, flying through there.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Hey Josh, we want you on the show at some point. So
Yeah, bring a smile.
bring a smile, and the kids.
But I met you at the Bruce Jutnick event in
Yes,
Sacramento, the gathering.
Yes.
Like, we don't know when, about 10 years ago or so.
Yeah.
And I got some hands-on with you there.
Yes, and that's what, folks, to show you how generous this man is, after meeting us there, probably the following year, we're again to the next seminar, but he comes early, like about 3 or 4 days. And rather than hanging out wherever he was, because you're actually in the area here, right?
Right.
And I guess, I forget how we reached out to him, but he came over and was so generous, gave us like 4 or 5 hours of playing with Danny and myself, and then the day of, you take 2 of my students, this young man and Jordan, and you and Josh were teaching him a bunch of stuff, and I tell you, that was such a joy. I mean, I was like, wow, how generous is this guy?
Yeah, we were behind somebody else's banner.
Right, and
while
we're
the
in
whole
the back,
seminar was
yeah.
going on, and we were doing our own thing. Yeah, that was a lot of fun.
But to take the time,
That was back at the gathering, right?
Yeah. But to take your time and even just to sit with us, even just to talk, but you did
Us
even beyond
nobodies,
that.
yeah.
You were like training something that anybody else would have killed to get to, and I've never forgotten that. So now, like whenever Naeem and I go to seminars, we kind of start helping other people. We say, hey, look, Jerry, try that. Here's how we do. Right? Because you don't see that often in the martial world.
Right.
Everybody's stingy. Everybody's no, that's my stuff, and
Right.
blah blah blah. But I've always respected that from you.
When I called you on this trip, I just wanted to get together and train. Let's just
Dude, that blew me away. I was like, holy shit, he remembers me from 10 years ago.
Right.
Although to be honest, I have been bugging him about coming to the show a couple of times. Hey, Master Zeke.
So you just, he wanted to train, but you're like, hey, let's put him on camera. Okay. That sounds like you.
Yeah, well, we do have demos at the end of our conversation, so
Okay.
you get to slap Naeem around a bit. That would be a lot of fun. But yeah, again, I don't forget such things because to me, they come so rare and so few, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure you've been around in martial arts enough that people are not just going to be willing to give,
Right.
and so.
Right.
Where does that come from?
I got that from my mentors. The older people. I've had some ancient teachers. I've had some teachers
And they're still alive.
that were very advanced in age, and they train with super martial arts teachers through their lives, and now they're 70, 80, 90 plus years old, and they're still doing it. They're still sparring. They still have a hands-on. They're always smiling and laughing and telling jokes. And if they see anybody that's having a problem, they just go and interject and step in and talk to them and help them.
So you were taught to focus on the ones struggling, not the ones excelling.
So I traveled a lot with Grandmaster Kakoi and did seminars and presentations with him. And when he would get up, he would demonstrate, explain what he's doing, demonstrate it, and then sit down. And then I was like his point man. So I'm just walking the room, and he's like, Zach, right? And he points somebody out, and boom. So you might have 30, 40 people in a room, and he's pointing this person out, and I go and fix them, and as soon as I'm done, he's like, right? And so he has me going from person to person, correcting him and helping him.
You bring up an incredible, I have never met Kakoi, but everybody hears, everybody in the martial world knows of it, especially if you're FMA. I mean, he's like one of those legends that just doesn't go away. How did you run into him?
That's a good story. I was living on a mountain in Tennessee, and I wasn't married yet to my wife Diane, and she's in California, Redwood City, right here. And we had met in 1988 at the internationals, and then we re-met somewhere around 2000 at a seminar in Philadelphia camp, and rekindled our friendship, and we know all these similar people. We have all the same friends and the same. It's interesting. We would talk about people. It's like, you know so and so. Oh yeah, it's like I really like that guy. Me too. Well, you know so and so, and it's like, yeah, I can't stand that guy. He's an asshole. Me too. It's like, really, you're right. He is an asshole. We share our stories why that guy's an asshole and why this guy, we love him, right? So, we talked all the time, and she was just getting started in Filipino martial arts, and she started training with a guy that's a couple steps, generations under Kakoi, and she was training with him, and she'd never met him, and so she calls me up and she says, Zach, I'm gonna pick this guy up in San Jose and drive him to Chico, and there's going to be a couple seminars, and then we're going to drive back. It's an all-day deal. It's a long drive, and I don't know who this. I've never met this man. He's older. I don't even know if he speaks English. It's like I'm kind of leery about the whole thing. A big responsibility to haul him across California to this event, and I'm like, well, who is it? And she's like, would you like to come out and help me drive and take him? And I'm like, well, who is it? And she's like, Kakoi Kanyeti. And I'm like, oh my God. I'm going to be in a car with Kakoi for like hours, and I can talk to him about anything.
Look at
it's
the
like,
smile.
And it's like,
Kept
oh
the
my
body
God. It's
team.
like, I'm down. Right. So we drive to his house. The day comes, we drive to his house at about 4 a.m. to pick him up, to be there early enough for the seminar, get him in the car, and Diane's driving because she knows the roads around here. She's local. She can navigate, the Bay Area really well. And so he's in the center of the back seat in this SUV, and I'm in the passenger front seat, and I'm just turning around, put my arm and say, so, Grandmaster, it's like this question, and we just talked the whole drive.
Wow.
How many
Of course,
hours that was.
you
Just
got it.
nonstop asking him questions and him talking. And then when we got there, it's a room full of people that are Dosei Park's black belts. I'm not. I don't know anything about Dosei Parks. And
Did you have any Filipino martial?
Oh yeah, I'd
background at
done
that point?
Pakiti Terji for over 20 years at that point.
At that point.
Yeah. So but at that point I had a Matas Naguro rank in Pakiti Terji, or that might have been right before I got that master rank in Pakiti Terji from Bill McGrath. But anyway, we talk all the way there, and we became fast friends for whatever reason.
Filipinos have a way of doing that.
Yeah, and then so it's a bunch of Dosei Parks black belts in there. And he starts doing his thing, and then he just starts using me to be his dummy and Uki for all of his stuff. And
that must have been crazy.
And then one of my friends comes over and is like, "These guys are all grousing because he's using you to demonstrate with instead of them." And they know because these guys were Kempo guys too, and they didn't know, you know, they didn't like it.
And I've always heard he was very generous as well.
I got a lot of that from him too. He was the most. I call him like the Filipino Santa Claus. He was so genuine and so nice. You hear about some of these guys, and they're always in some kind of crap online and saying stuff and throwing people out and all this back and forth.
Yeah.
That's not him. He would talk about his exploits in fights because he had over 100 challenge matches in the Philippines in Cebu.
Right.
You know, and you know, he was just very, very sweet, kind-hearted, giving, loving person. But when you lined up with him face to face and because his sparring style is like either hand you can put on the other person's chest. Here,
he's a true
you're like
close quarter. Yeah,
truly the closest quarter FMA I've ever seen.
I have a bit of a disrespectful question. Was it really face to face?
In my eyes, he was like this.
He was larger than life.
Oh wow!
Yeah, he always came across that. If you watch his videos, he's always laughing and smiling and just.
Yeah,
you can tell he's just having a good time kicking your ass.
Right.
That was always very, you know.
He asked me one time, and he says, "Zach, what is the very best disarm?" And I'm like, "I don't know, Manong, what is the very best disarm?" And he says, "A disarming smile." And so when he got hands-on, he was always smiling and laughing.
Right.
When I would go to Cebu, I went to Cebu like 11 times to train, and would normally stay 10 days, 2 weeks, and be on the mat twice a day the whole time, and get an ass whooping from morning to night.
Consistent ass whooping the whole time.
Yeah. Another funny story is when I went to Ron Liu school, so you said you interviewed Ron Liu. So that was my first meeting with him in a group, in that kind of situation where these are all top level guys, the core group in the United States, really. And I go over there. This is after I've met him and did the Chico trip. But I go in there and these guys are all like 10 years older than me, right? They're all older and they're like amazing.
Ron's 20 years older than you.
Amazing martial artists. June Cultiverio, Ron Liu, Wally Astropia, Guy Cananahan.
How are you even remembering all these names?
It kind of scarred me for life. But I'm watching these guys on the side sparring with each other, and the range they're working at, and the fluidity they have, and the way their striking patterns run right into the disarms and stuff was pretty amazing. And I'm like, oh my God, these guys, they're light years ahead of me. And then I watch each one would take turns going up to Grandmaster Kakoy and sparring with him, and then he would just destroy him. Right. And I thought they were just being nice to him, right? And it's like, these guys are lightning fast, but when they get around him, they'd slow it down a little bit, and he would just bring it, right? They couldn't get anything on him, and it's like, they're letting him do that. And then I went to Cebu, so I had hosted some events, co-hosted events in Miami and Pittsburgh and other places, but at first it was Miami, and had hands-on with him. When I went to Cebu, I got to really spar with him the first time. And in my mind, it's like, because he was big on disarms, and it's like, I'm going to hold on to this stick for dear life. I don't want him to get it out of my hand, and it's like, I'm just going to keep him from disarming me because that's his thing. Right. And so he goes for a disarm and misses it, goes for a disarm, misses it, goes for a disarm, misses it, and he's like, in his mind is like, screw that, and then all of a sudden he's all over my body. Right. Right, and I can't block him, I can't stop him, I can't see the stick half the time. He's hitting me in the back of my head, top of my head, up and down my body, my knees, elbows, hands. It's like he's just picking me apart and laughing out loud the whole time. So you know, other than the stick hitting my head, that sound, the rattan stick hitting you in the head, right? They call that bokub.
Yeah.
Bokub, not on your head, right? I took my stick at one point and threw it on the floor. Because he gave up on the disarms. It's just, okay, I'm just going to beat the crap out of the guy. And so I throw the stick on the floor, and he's still coming at me. I cover up like that, and he's still hitting in between my arm, laughing. And then he goes for my knees, and he's walking forward in these short steps, and he's just cracking my knees and my hips. And I'm like, oh, crap. And then I put my hands down like this, trying to catch his stick, and then he brought it back up to my head. So our sparring lasted for about 60 seconds.
60 seconds.
Oh, that happened in
All in 60 seconds.
I get in a car, I get in a taxi cab to go back to the hotel. My wife's on this side, and I took her, and I'm like, feel this. And I'm like, feel these knots all over my head. And then it's like, and then before we got, Junior and Ron Lou and Wally and all those guys, they're afraid of him.
I can imagine.
They're in learning mode with him. They're not trying to best him. They're trying to learn.
Right.
If they know if they heat it up,
he's going to start hitting them.
Knots all over your head. Then you can't stop it. You can't block it. That was the thing about the curving strike that he had. With tick and curving, like he did all these pronating and supinating with ticks all up and down the body. So he was really good at the with ticks.
You know, I recognize those when he does that. Because you can see it's very prominent when you're watching him.
Yeah, from outside, but when
But I used to always wonder how that was, because it always looked odd, right? It didn't look like a regular strike. It was like he's coming this way, right?
Right. So he would set you up. So he would feed these linear strikes at you, and you see that for a couple times, and he may hit you with one, like on the body low, maybe around the belt line, and he would hit you with that. Right, and then he'd come back a few seconds later and hit you again, and then kind of move around, hitting you in spots. So your side starts getting tired, sensitive to the strike, so you start dropping your stick to try and block there, and then as soon as you start, if you're able to get the stick there to try and block, then he'd wrap around, and he comes around it and hit you like that. So a lot of people have a wrong impression about Dosei Paras with their tick, because they like his would pronate like this, and he would touch the stick on your back and then come up. You just leave it in place from your lower back, like kidney area, and come up and just touch the back of your head like this. And so his stick's just like hello.
Yeah, I'm here.
I'm knocking you out now. So the strike was really flat, where he's going to really throw that snapping motion into the back to that linear. So he starts at linear and then pow, like that, and it's a knockout.
So it's coming down.
Right, but when he's being nice to you sparring, he'll touch you like that, and people think this is bullshit. People don't fight like that. Yeah. But he's just a nice way. But this is a different thing with like the Dog Brothers style, Kiki Tertius style of minimum amount of armor, 31-inch stick, inch diameter heavy stick, and you're trying to blast each other without hardly any armor. Everybody's going to get hurt or injured a little bit doing that.
Right, of course.
So now you got a period of time with that injury to get ready to spar again, kind of thing. So people can talk a big game, but then, when you spar, you're probably going to get injured if you're going at it like that. Where the Dosei Paras guys in Cebu at Kakoi's gym, they spar every day, but they're very controlled. So it's very close, and they're very controlled, and so they can spar at speed with no safety equipment, and you get bruised. Yeah. When I go over there, I joke about looking like a blueberry muffin. Right. Because I'm a white guy, a big white guy to them, with blue bruises all over me. So I look like a blueberry muffin.
But that's great conditioning for you, though.
Yeah.
I mean, I can imagine that you could take a shot these days and not even...
Oh, yeah. It's funny when I'm training with somebody, they'll accidentally do something wrong, like a beginner, and hit me, and they're like, "Oh, I'm sorry." I was like, "Oh, you have no idea."
Yeah, you
don't ever have to apologize for that.
That's more of a tickle than anything else.
No apology needed. Yeah.
I like that because I do that with some of my students.
Oh, I try to hit you all the time.
He tries to hit me all the time.
All the time.
But I was doing Perry Place Trap or Hubad with one of my students. But he always had a fear of hurting somebody, right? So I was like, okay, we go 1, 2, 3, and then you throw your punch. And your punch always has to try to hit my face. And I would cover it. We go back and forth. And I noticed every time I got to the face part, to that punch, he would be really reluctant, right? So I said, no, deliver it. Don't worry, I'm going to block it. So one time, I see it coming down the pike, and I just let it go, and he went, wham, right? And he's like all freaked out. Oh my God, I'm sorry. Oh my, I can't believe it. I go, dude, I let you hit me. Calm your ass down. Did you see me flinch or anything? What's wrong with you? I go, I wanted you to feel that so that you understood what it is to actually make impact on somebody, and that you're going to start doing it more often. And sure enough, he said, okay. And now he plays, now he actually extends to what he should, right? Because, beginners, they're always afraid to hurt somebody, especially this kid.
Well, not all beginners.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. But, to me, that was a learning tool, to let them feel that, what it is to hit somebody. Right. But, we as the instructors are like, I don't care, just come on, bring it, right? But he was freaked out, he's like, oh shit, I killed my master. Not at all.
Yeah, I think I was pretty fortunate because I moved around a lot and traveled, and I would move to wherever, and it's like I would look up what's available to train and find something that fit what I thought I wanted and go train and then move on. But I also had a substantial amount of decades in primary systems. At Parker Tempo, I've been doing since 1980.
Wow.
Pakiti Terja since around 1988, 89. And then with Grandmaster Kakoi, I started with him in 2003, training, and then trained with him right up to his death. Now I'm involved with, I have a teacher, Zhang Yun. He's a master. He's from Beijing, China. He teaches Wu style Taiji and Yin style Bagua. He teaches all the saber forms, Jian, Taiji Dao, which is a 4-foot long sword, a saber form from Bagua. So my daily training for myself is mostly Taiji and Bagua and the Chinese weapons. And then I'm constantly reviewing something to go do seminars with.
Now, let me ask you this, because one of the other big names that you just brought up, and somebody I've always admired and would love to have a conversation with one day, is Bill McGrath.
Yeah.
That guy is larger than life.
He is.
When I saw the videos back in the 70s and how he was looking, he's just moving the way he does, as big as he was. And then you see him now.
Back then, he was this big.
Right. He was just
skinny,
tall, skinny dude. But now when you look at him, he looks like a college professor, and he teaches like a college professor, right?
Right.
But the guy is amazing.
Right.
I think he's one of the few people who actually understood Pakiti Tesho through and through.
Yes.
Isn't he?
Entirely,
yeah.
What can you say about?
He was a kid when he met Leo Wahe. So he's like 11, 12, 13, 14, somewhere in there, really young kid. They were like neighbors down the street kind of thing. So he would be sitting on a porch when Leo came home from work. Let's, I want to train, right? So he got it honest, over decades and decades of training.
And he got it when it was fresh in the beginning.
Yeah. Right. So when I was living in New Orleans and training with Omar, at that time, Omar moved to Texas. I moved to Tennessee, so now we're very far apart. And that's when I started training with Bill McGrath around 1991 on a regular basis, going to camps and stuff. And I trained with him throughout the whole system until I got Matas Nuguro rank around 2005.
Wow.
And so he's the real deal. He's a great teacher, and has the system, and no matter how they try and cut it and say, well,
Tri-V and all this other
changes
that
I don't see anybody. I see him come up with terms and stuff and see this stuff, and it's like, I learned that from Omar, way back when. It's like I don't see anybody do anything new or big and different that I don't understand or I don't know a name for that. kind of thing, right?
We often talk about that on a show where we tell people, there isn't really a lot of things that are out there that's going to surprise anybody. It might be just a different name, and once you look at it, you're like, oh, we call that this, right?
Yeah.
2 hands, 2 feet. You're not going to create this special super serum type of, martial arts that's going to be anything different than what everybody else is doing.
You made me think of my Tai Chi teacher, Zhang Yun. Actually, the person that introduced me to him, Mike Snyder, he was at the gathering one year that I was there. That same time, I think we got in a class.
Okay.
You, me, Dan, and a couple of I think Josh was and Diane. We got in a class with him, long hair, hippie-looking guy.
Oh yeah, okay. I remember him.
Yeah.
Well, when I went there, I was serious about finding somebody that did push hands. That's my missing link for one of my missing links.
I remember
was
that guy.
Push hands.
Yeah.
Right. So I find at that gathering they have,
all kinds of
dozens and dozens and dozens of presenters, and I find, push hands. I go to the push hands class and meet him, and then I kind of follow the guy around all weekend. Show me more push hands, right? So he got me an introduction and stuff. So that's kind of a funny story, but he got me an introduction 2010, like December 2010, and so I've been with Zhang Yun since then. But I went to his house the first time, and then I met him in New Jersey and Princeton in an event. I walk in, and he recognized me because I've been to his house and got in a class, and probably an hour into the class, he just walks up to me and holds his arm and he says, do you know China? And that's the Chinese equivalent of locking or throwing, grappling, basically. He says, do you know China? And I'm like, yes, sir, I know some. And he just held out his arm and said, okay, do China. So before I go into what happened, I think I've been doing some form of grappling since I was a kid.
Right.
My father taught me, my brother, wrestling, and I've trained with different catch wrestlers and jiu-jitsu guys. And then a lot of the Pakiti Turjas do MOG, like a lot of grappling, a lot of their knife stuff involves grappling. So pretty proficient in locking and counter locking, and working lock flow and countering and getting in and out of locks and disarms. So I think if I went to some sort of Aiki jiu-jitsu school or catch wrestling or judo, and started to talk inside wrist lock kind of thing, what I'm calling inside wrist lock is here, where this one would be more outside wrist lock, because you get the outside of their body, inside of their body, right? So if I got around different people, and I've done this, and it's like they're going to have some variation that I know or I've seen, or I have a different name for it, or it's just slightly different, or they tied into and add something to it, and it's like, okay, I understand all that, and I can learn it really quickly now. Not because I'm smart, but because
you've seen so many.
I'm so old I fart dust, So I put my arm out, or he puts his arm out, Zhang Yun, my Tai Chi teacher, and I think the first thing I did was inside wrist lock. And so I get on him, and I'm, I don't really know what to expect. And so I grab his arm and he just shifts back and does this. That's all he did, was like this, shifted his weight, and I'm holding on, and all of a sudden I'm weighted heavily on my lead left leg, and my back foot starts to fly off the ground, and then I'm lifted in the air, and I'm holding on, doing my inside wrist lock, and I'm looking at the ceiling. I'm horizontal in the air like this, and then boom, onto the floor, a hard wooden floor. And I'm smiling as I'm like, I don't know what just happened, but and I jump up with this smile. It's like, okay, and he's ready. He puts his arm out. I did what I call outside figure four. I put the figure four on, and now he does this instead of this. I go flying, same thing. And then I did straight arm bar, and he just goes like that, and then I'm over by the mirror, right? And it's like anybody else I had hands on like that with, I could recognize and probably counter what they're doing.
Right.
I couldn't even describe or rationalize how he's doing this.
Right.
Can you now?
Yes.
Okay. Just making
Yes.
sure we're learning something.
Yes. I figure I'm about another 15 or 20 years into getting it down the way I want it. But yeah, I can
I got the gist of it.
I can do push hands now and use that version of defense against blocks and throws.
When we were in Sacramento, you were giving a demo, and you were doing a knife thing, and either before you or after you, Art Gonzalez. I don't know.
Who was before him?
He had before you,
Yeah.
right? He had also done a knife thing, and I tell you, everybody thinks you can only do so much with knives, but there was such a difference between what you two had done. I loved your stuff. His not so much, and he's a good man. Rest in peace. But you went a different route. I mean, I know you do a combative thing now, right? That's
Right.
your tactical stuff that you do.
I call it tactical counter offense.